What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Dom and Pop DC Sports Talk Plus podcast. This week, we're going to be checking in on the Commanders OTAs as usual, as well as going around the NFL on some news, and of course, covering our Che Cazz of the week. Real quick before we get into today's episode, first of all, we want to thank you guys all for tuning in, and second of all, we want to remind you, if you haven't already, please click the like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube at Dom and Pop Podcast, and if you're watching on Spotify, please save the episode, download it on any of the podcast services, and please remember to follow us on all social media at DC Sports Plus. Again, that's at DC Sports Plus. Thank you so much, guys, and enjoy the episode. Hey, Pop, how you doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, a little
coming off a week out in California, or half a week out there, and then a couple of days in DC.
Yep. There you go. Had a nice little week of vacation. I had a short week of work this week myself. Yeah, it was nice. Feeling rested and relaxed. I took this weekend easy, since we were kind of running around last week, didn't get too much too much rest, so got to enjoy, feeling good, feeling spry, ready for another pod.
I actually made a visit to the Promised Land, FedEx Field, and went to the Coldplay concert there. So
yeah, that's all the rage on DC sports media this week is Coldplay. It's a funny thing, typical early June headlines, right? But how'd you like the concert? How was the show? How was the stadium experience?
Good show. I mean, definitely more of an MC band than a 808 band, but I like some of their early stuff, and they definitely got a lot of good music and pretty interesting with all the lights and effects. And first time back at the stadium since they've put up the Commanders stuff, so
that's cool.
That was interesting to see, but yeah, good night out.
There you go. Good night out. No crazy Twitter confrontations, no stands falling, no brown water, nothing like that.
No. I thought about that a little bit while we were there, but no incident. Incident-free.
Didn't have to tell anybody to bite D's coming out of the parking lot, leaving? No?
No, I'm a little depressed that our boy Jack Del Rio was so quiet this week.
Yeah, he's calmed down. Well, in about 6 months, maybe he'll congratulate somebody else on getting a head coaching job. Maybe he'll congratulate like Brian Daboll in like 8 months for getting his job with the Giants or something like that. We'll see.
Know.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But anyways, let's get right into it on the football side of things. OTAs this week. We got some good stuff to talk about. So what do you want to start with, Pop?
Yeah, let's start with Chase Young. Chase Young, made it out to OTAs this week, which was good to see. He also talked to the press and had some good insight in terms of where he's at in terms of the rehabs, that he's running and that he's squatting significant amount of weight, but still has a long way to go, which you can imagine. He also explained a bit about the whole setup and why he was out in Colorado rehabbing, and that it's all been worked out and cleared, with the Washington Commanders staff, training staff, which is good to hear as well. But I do think it's important to him to be there as a presence. Sounds like he stood by Jack Del Rio and helped encourage his teammates, and I do think there's a lot of value to those mental reps.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think it's good to have him back out there. I know there was some controversy about, I heard people saying kind of, if he's training and rehabbing, what's he doing outside of the facility that he can't do within the facility? Why isn't he there? But he's back now. He's showing face. He's doing his normal leadership stuff, so I think that's exciting. Really hope his rehab goes well. I like the fact... Well, actually, let me ask you before I give my take on it. What do you think about the whole... He's not giving a deadline. He's not saying exactly where he's at. How do you feel about that in a day and age where we seem to know down to the hour where players are in their rehabs? And what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's impossible to know for sure.
Yeah.
So I think anytime we've had that hype, I remember RG3 is all in for week one.
Yeah.
And, I just think it puts way too much pressure on the player. And I like the fact that he's not overhyping where he's at. And he's just said it's going to take the time that it's going to take. And, it's definitely a tough circumstance for him, coming off what was not such a great year and then getting injured. And then coming back off of that, there's definitely enough pressure on him for sure. And he doesn't need to add to that by trying to nail down a timeline. So I think it's a smart move.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to say before I asked you that's my take as well. I think you've seen across the league and we've seen on our team, like you said, with the RG3 thing, I don't think any good comes from it. There's an internal motivation that I think for players, some guys need that, but we know Chase Young has that fire at any time of day, under any circumstance. I don't think he really needs that motivation to keep working. So I like it. And you know what? If we don't see him till week 3, week 4, but he comes out and he's that his dominant self that he was, I would love that. I'd be totally fine with that. I mean, obviously you'd love to see him week 1, but I'd rather see him take his time, because this is a guy that we hope will be like a Ray Lewis for us, or like an Ovechkin, like a guy that's the cornerstone of our franchise for a long time. So at the end of the day.
So how do you feel about that? Like, what are you expecting out of Chase Young this year?
So it's tough because we saw him. This is, the thing that gets circulated around the DC local media a lot. This whole thing of like the defense really stepped up in that latter half of 2020 against some pretty bad teams, some bad quarterbacks. And we saw the defense really come into their own. And at the head of that was Chase Young. And I remember watching those games with you. That was the COVID year, so I took a month off at the end of the year, and I was in Maryland watching the games with you. And I remember watching Chase Young come into himself and just going like, this kid, man, this is just exactly this is what this franchise needs to turn around. And then, he did tear his ACL last year, but prior to that, he had like, 1.5 sacks through 8 games, which sacks don't tell everything, but there's definitely a bit of concern for me, where it's kind of like, he was this dominant force his rookie year. Guys didn't really know what to expect out of him in terms of the offenses he was competing against. Now he starts seeing those double teams. He starts getting the respect that he deserves. And all of a sudden, where's Chase Young? It was pretty quiet to start the season before he went down and got hurt. So I don't really know what to expect from him coming back. I mean, I'm hoping there were a lot of system issues, and when he did get hurt, I'm trying to remember, it was right around or right before when the defense kind of started playing better towards the second half of the season, and a lot of those systemic adjustments had been made.
Seems like it was more after he was out. After him and Sweat were out, they seemed to start playing better.
And I think a big part of that was because they were real stubborn about only rushing 4 for the majority of the first half of the season, because they figure we have Sweat. I mean, when you have a defensive line that is Sweat, Young, Payne, Allen, and then at the time Ioannidis rotating off the bench, you should be able to get pressure with 4. So I understand the thinking, but we just weren't getting that. And then we started, you see that blitz more in the second half of the season, and all of a sudden now they're getting more pressure. So hopefully, Del Rio has understood that, Ron has understood that, and we can see Chase in a part of those 5-6-man sets being the dominant piece.
I mean, I agree. I'm not really sure 100% what to think. There's just a part of me that's really concerned that maybe he's not quite going to be at the level that we're expecting of the number 2 pick. He was Defensive Rookie of the Year, which is great. Maybe, like you said, there were a lot of system issues for sure. None of the defense seemed to look good. William Jackson really seemed to struggle, and then they seemed to kind of find and adjust their way. They better roll for Landon Collins as they went along. So, I hope he has a great year. I just am not sure what to expect. I don't really have that gut feel kind of one way or the other in terms of, is he going to really come in and be the superstar? It's going to maybe take some time coming off that knee.
Yeah.
There also seemed to be some things technique-wise that he was, not doing right. But he seems to be a great kid with a great attitude. I do think that if he's going to be the team leader, he needs to be more the team leader in action and not just words.
Yep.
And part of that is being present. I mean, could you imagine Jonathan Allen skipping OTAs, to go make commercials? You know what I mean? And I know that was last year, but I think he definitely needs to kind of start, living up to that team leader role. But, hope. And then, Montez Sweat is someone that we don't probably talk enough about, but he's got a great amount of potential too. So that hopefully that 1-2 punch really comes into effect this time.
And, something that I think is slept on, which, I mean, is water under the bridge at this point, but we had Ryan Kerrigan in 2020 and we didn't have him last year. And when you look at the depth on the outside after the guys that we lost, it was a pretty big drop-off, and that defensive line has to rotate, and especially in Del Rio's system, they like to rotate those guys a lot. Right. So I think that's a big thing as well, that maybe we don't talk about enough. But, yeah, I
think with some of the young guys now that got playing time the end of last year, I think that depth is
shored up by now, but I think that's why we saw a bit of a drop-off at the beginning of the season last year.
Agreed. That's a good point.
But yeah, I'm hoping we see some system adjustments, and I think we have to rush more than 3rd and 6 on their own 30-yard line. Send 6 guys. Get after them. Right. Like we need to see that level of aggression again, because you saw a team that had nothing to lose showing a lot of aggression against some bad quarterbacks, because that's how you fluster them. You can fluster really good quarterbacks by showing a lot of aggression as well. So I would like to get back to that defensively, and I hope Chase Young can be at the forefront of that. But it's funny. He's almost a metaphor for the whole team. You don't really know what to expect. It's kind of, it can go anywhere. But speaking of not knowing what to expect, Curtis Samuel, how you feeling? What do you think there? I mean, we could talk about that all day.
Yeah, no, I mean, Scott Turner spoke, and I thought his presser had a lot of very good insight into it. And one of the things was talking about Curtis Samuel and hearing the reporters talk about the practices. It sound like he's getting featured more than any other player out there in terms of getting touches out of the backfield. And you touched on this last week about how he's kind of, our version of Deebo Samuel, not as physical, but certainly just very versatile. And, he even talked about how he'll do whatever, they want him to. But yeah, I'm trying not to get too excited about Curtis Samuel, because I was really excited. I really loved him in Carolina, and he was, I think, my number one free agent last year in terms of the guy that I wanted on the team. And given what a disappointing year it was in terms of not just being able to get him on the field. Yeah. Trying not to get overly excited, but fully healthy Curtis Samuel definitely could be a game changer. And I just think of Curtis Samuel and a J.D. McKissick. I think those two guys, in terms of imagine, that offense, right, with Dotson hopefully playing well, and of course Terry, and it's like, who do you guard, coming out of that backfield, and with the wideouts, it could definitely be a really good setup there.
Yeah, and especially in the world of, I don't know where we were last year, but I think in 2020 we were number 1 in the NFL in pre-snap motion, or towards the top, and we seem to always be that with Scott Turner's offense. So especially in the world of guys moving around a lot of that position flex, Curtis Samuel is kind of the exact type of piece you want, as is Jahan Dotson, which we can get into in a second. But yeah, Curtis Samuel I think is really interesting this year, because honestly, it has to be some kind of an improvement from last year. I mean, I produced about as much as Curtis Samuel last year. You just got to get on the field and be healthy, and
so
we have to have something.
I don't know if it's fair to over worry about that. Just write off last year as just a difficult year for him. But if he could be on the field and he could be healthy, he definitely seems to be very motivated and confident now.
The bottom line is, if he tore his ACL in training camp last year, which is essentially what happened with the groin injury, right? We'd be looking for a bounce back and for him to be the Curtis Samuel that we paid for this year. So if he's saying he's fully healthy and he's playing, I expect the Curtis Samuel we played for in terms of what I want to see from him. Realistically, my expectations are not that high. I say maybe 80% of what we're used to seeing out of Curtis. If we can get that, would be great. But I think over
Hopefully
under.
it's a lot better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can get 12 to 14 games out of him and have him produce decently, 5-6 catches per game, I'd be really happy with that. And I think that would be. We talk about the drop off, just how big the gap is between Heineke and Wentz. I think the gap between Curtis Samuel and the next guy down on our wide receiver depth chart last year is equally big, maybe bigger, if we can get some healthy contributions out of him. So
yeah, and
we'll see.
Another topic that came up, and not only with Scott Turner, but some of the reporting is that Brian Robinson getting some first team touches as a running back. And interesting that, in terms of when you look at the running back group, he's the purest runner of the group. And then
Definitely.
even, Antonio Gibson drops some weight. And you heard Scott Turner talking about using Antonio Gibson more in the pass game, more with that versatility. Again, it was interesting when we went back to the draft and we talked about guys like Brian Robinson and Fidarius Mathis. Did I get that name right? Fidarius?
I think it's Fidarian.
Not sure. Fidarian.
That one, I'll give you a mulligan on that one. He's new, and that's a tough name. We got to get it right.
You're seeing, those picks really make sense, right? To have that runner like Brian Robinson added to the mix, and then to have that additional D-line depth. But anyway, interesting to see that him get some first-team carries. It is OTA. It is early. Turner said, look, we can't expect anything much out of any of these rookies. They are rookies, maybe with Dotson being the exception. But, it was interesting to see that. And I think I just got this feeling that kid is going to give us a lot this year. And it's going to be interesting how that overall balance and dynamic works out between him and Gibson.
Yeah, you've heard, Robinson, you're saying?
Yeah.
I really like Robinson. I mean, like you said, more of a pure runner than Gibson. And I think we were missing that, Peyton Barber was not a great version of it, but he was a version of that like 2nd and 1, let's just get the first down kind of guy, that like battering ram type running back.
In theory.
Yeah.
In theory. I'm not sure the execution was always there.
He was the best in the NFL at getting 1 yard, but past that is not great for that. But, and not literally, I'm making it a joke. But, yeah, Peyton Barber, we need that type of, but better executed. And I think I'm going to do that again. But, yeah, I think Robinson will shore up some of those pure runner type situations. Like, it's like 2nd and 7, and you need to get 3 or 4 yards so that you're looking at 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, whatever. You're looking at that kind of situation. I think that kind of situation is going to be really good for Brian Robinson. I think he's going to help us there, and that's a situation where Gibson necessarily wasn't as great. And I think, we know the classic Scott Turner pass on first down and then run on 2nd and 10 when it's incomplete. Hopefully Brian Robinson could get us a few more yards in that situation.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
We love that one.
That's been one of my biggest pet peeves during the season. Dominic touched on it. But you go back and you watch last season, and we'll see what happens this season. How many times did we run on 2nd and 10? Used to drive me up a wall. It's like, to me, it's like if you don't run, if you pass on 1st and 10 and it's an incompletion, you've pretty much put yourself in another passing situation. Every once in a while, as a surprise, you can mix it up. But, man, I'm telling you, almost every 2nd and 10, we ran the ball. It used to drive me nuts.
And do something.
Hey, Dominic, I wanted to check in with you on something, though. Like, how's that weight training going? I mean, are you up to 155, 160 yet? Are you ready to fill in at linebacker? I mean, I know you got that pull-up bar, but last I saw, I was kind of hanging clothes off of that thing.
Yeah, it's not looking good. Had some stomach issues last week, so the bulking process has slowed down, and the pull-up bar is not turning out to be as productive of a purchase as I thought. It's more about I rent. I don't want to damage the door frame. I got to be smart about that. Just to get my security.
So our backup plan of having you be that third linebacker for the Commanders is just not looking too great.
I think we should
Because
get.
I don't see another better plan that's evident at the moment.
Well, Jimmy, Will, Scott, if you're listening, I think you guys should start bulking up. Yeah, I think we might need something there because the linebacker situation. I mean, Che Cazz, David Mayo. This is not our Che Cazz of the week, but definitely a Che Cazz situation. David Mayo getting first team reps over the number 18 pick last year, Jamin Davis. I mean, mod on. What's going on there?
I've been the first to say it's too early to say that Jamin's a bust. And, again, maybe reading too much into OTAs, but apparently, this was reported by Pete Haley that David Mayo was actually with the starting group, and then they rotated Jamin Davis in. So it's like, David Mayo was a backup last year, and he only played because of injury. And he was a guy, seemed to do a decent job, seemed to be high energy. Cole Holcomb, if we hear everyone talk, has got a shot at all pro this year. Everyone seems very, very high at him, and I'm exaggerating and joking around a little bit there. But yeah, you just don't know what's going on. I mean, they seem to be lining up in this 2 linebacker set, whether it's St. Juste in the slot, or, are they going to go with the Buffalo nickel and try to find somebody to fill in for where Collins was filling in? But it just seems like who's going to be that 11th defender?
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird, that your standard package is going to be 2 linebackers. I don't know. Maybe they're just being innovators like the old 46 that the Bears, ran back in the day, and they were the first to do it. I mean, but this is an interesting situation developing there.
Yeah, well, it's tough. I mean, so I've been on the opposite side of the Jamin Davis patience train with you. I remember exactly where I was when Ron drafted him, and I had just left work, and I was sitting in my car because I didn't want to drive while I was waiting on the pick. So I was sitting in my car before I pulled out, watching it on my phone, and I was like, okay, we're definitely going linebacker. I like JOK. He had fallen down the board a pretty good bit. There was rumors of some heart issues, but none of that panned out, and he actually turned out to be the best linebacker of that class by far last year with a 76.5 PFF grade I'm looking at now. So we missed on that. We took Jamin Davis, and since then I've been pretty critical and skeptical, and this is really not helping. You look at his PFF grade from last year, 46.8, and you look at David Mayo, who is essentially, if I bulked up and had a few more inches in height, me. And he's got 42.9 PFF grade. So, I mean, heck, he's only 4% off from Jamin Davis on the PFF grade last year. So I guess it shouldn't be that big of a shock to us. But considering what we invested in Jamin Davis, it's
the
pretty
only other
disappointing.
linebacker I even recognize name on the roster is Khalid Hudson, because he was on the team for the last couple of years. And so, yeah, I got to think something's going to happen in free agency there. The thing that worries me is, okay, you go with a St. Juste, as your third corner. What if one of our corners gets hurt? Then what do you do? Who's your 11th defender at that point? There's got to be something done to address the situation. And it's the one concern is that, we've done pretty much very little to nothing other than a couple of later round draft picks to address the defense. And I personally favor the fact that we focused on offense and adding weapons and did all the things that we did there. But I don't know. It's just hard to figure out what we're going to do. I know you're a Percy Butler fan, but apparently he's one guy that they're not saying hasn't flashed very much, or they haven't seen a whole lot of. And, does he become your Buffalo guy? You're really going to count on a late round safety to be a starter, and you're starting 11th? Very interesting. So I don't know, son. I think I'm going to write out a training regimen for you. I think you're going to need to get some squats in and really, start working on your linebacker skills, because we're going to need you.
Yep. So definitely some interesting situations here. I'm really not happy with the way the defensive offseason has gone. I think Another interesting thing is Landon Collins. Maybe we do end up bringing him back for some reduced money, and he can do that Buffalo nickel thing that we saw some really good things out of him last
that would
year.
make a lot of sense if
And
he could do
maybe,
it.
yeah, and maybe that would give Percy Butler the chance to kind of develop and use his speed. The big knock on Percy Butler is his tackling. So that makes me nervous if he's
Doesn't
going to be
sound like
Buffalo
a,
nickel.
yeah, third hybrid linebacker.
So
to
don't
me,
like
yeah.
that. And I mean, I'm not going to say Kendall Fuller is injury prone because he's not, but he's been known to roll an ankle and tweak a hamstring here and there, as is Landon Collins, frankly. So
You're not
I
going to
don't
get
know-
through the full season with all your three
No.
corners being healthy the entire time. So.
It's insane. I mean, it's like what they're doing here is like what I did in fantasy football last year, which is I took Christian McCaffrey with the 1-1, and then I didn't draft another running back until I took Ronald Jones in the 7th round. You want to know how that worked out for me? I won 3 games in my fantasy football league last year. It was real bad because guess what? People get hurt. You got to be ready for that. It's just going to happen, and this team is not ready for that defensively. So that makes me really nervous, and I think when we look back to the situation we're trying to avoid, which is Wentz being in pressure situations with the ball in his hands, because that seems to kind of be his Achilles heel. We're putting our offense in a position where we're either just going to have to score all over people all the time, which guess what? That means Wentz is going to have to be slinging it, or we're going to have to clutch some games out via Carson Wentz with 2 minutes left on the board. So that makes me
Also,
uncomfortable,
all
but
red
you
meat
never
and
know,
pasta
you know?
diet for you, son. We need you to bulk up.
Us.
This is getting to be a code red situation. So
All red
we know
meat.
you got the speed.
Yeah, all red meat and pasta is going to be looking rough for me. We're going to have to... I'm going to need some different supplements or something like that to get me through my day because that could have some consequences. But anyways, let's get around the NFL. We've done enough talking about the Commanders for this week, I think. Lamar Jackson. What's going on there? So we have... He's basically... The team has picked up the 5th-year option, so he's due for like low $20 million next year, something in that ballpark. But yeah, is not too happy with his contract situation. Negotiations are looking a little weird. What do you think, Pop? How do you think it's looking?
Yeah, we're going to show a little love to our Ravens fan base here. Not too much love, but a little bit of love. But yeah, interesting. I think some controversy this week in terms of there was a talk on ESPN on Lamar's contract, and the talk was actually, does he deserve elite quarterback money because of his lack of prowess as a pocket passer? And of course, that was controversial because, some people feel like, hey, go look at the stats. He's very good out of the pocket. Does he deserve that elite contract? Is it that the Ravens don't want to pay him that elite money because they don't feel like he's strong enough out of the pocket? That really led to some controversy in ESPN. What are your thoughts on that from your perspective?
I mean, I think this is a pretty deep and nuanced issue in terms of when we talk about like elite quarterbacks that necessarily are more kind of dual threat guys. There's a lot of layers to this that I don't think we have time for. But the quick take that I have is, sure, he may not be elite out of the pocket, and I don't think he is. I don't think if there was a rule tomorrow that came out that said quarterbacks cannot leave the pocket, you either have to throw the ball away or take a sack, I don't think he's the top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Sorry, Ravens fans, I just don't. You're not putting him up against the Herberts, the Burrows, the Mahomeses, etc. But he is a damn good quarterback because guess what? He can run the ball. And he can paralyze defenses with his ability to run the ball, which gives him a little bit more of an ability outside the pocket. So
he can pass the ball too. He can pass the ball
exactly.
too, for sure.
He's got a gun. Like he's got a great arm. So I wouldn't say he's an elite pocket passer. And maybe we don't give him 5 years, $250 million, all guaranteed, because you worry about an increased injury risk, and we kind of saw that come back last year. Which is probably what he's looking for. But I still think you got to pay him what you need to pay him to keep him in town because what's your other option?
Yeah,
Seriously, you're going to get
I
Baker
agree,
Mayfield? Like, what's your other choice in Baltimore? Like, you go from a Super Bowl contending team with Lamar pretty consistently. As long as Lamar's healthy, that team is in Super Bowl talks. You go from that to just press the reset button because the guy runs the ball. Like, you got to capitalize on your talent.
I think you kind of look at it, and obviously people need to talk. And I do think, one of the challenges with Lamar is that if they've got to come back and he's really all he's got to do is drop back, right? And I'm not so much saying a 2-minute drill because I think he can run that, and the way he's able to change things up and get outside the pocket and, run read option or the pass option game. I mean, I think it's incredibly difficult to stop. And I guarantee you that defensive coordinators have more nightmares facing Lamar Jackson than they do, the standard drop back statue quarterback.
Matt Ryan.
It's just there's just a lot of things to have to stop. But I do think it's a bit of a problem when they get behind. We've seen it in playoff games where they can tee off and he's purely got to drop back. And I think being a drop back quarterback, I do think it's something that can be developed, but it seems difficult, right? If you haven't been doing it all through high school, all through college, coming to the NFL and learn that skill and just that clock in your head and the ability to get the ball out of your hands. We saw with RG3, it just wasn't something that when he tried to become a pure pocket passer, it just wasn't something that came naturally to him. But I definitely think he's an elite player. I think he can pass the ball, and I think there are ways to run your offense around him. And if they've got the team around him to help him, he's more than capable of leading the team to a championship. So, but I do get that side of the argument. I think it was overplayed. And then, we do have some information from our Ravens insider. So, Diamond Pop podcast has a Ravens insider. And, he said that basically what's interesting, and this is kind of my vibe from the outside looking in, is there's not a lot of, talk about what's going on with the deal. It's pretty hush-hush. But one thing that he did mention, which I was curious about, is that he said Lamar isn't going to hold out. So he's not at OTAs, but they're saying that he's going to be playing under that rookie contract. He is still making, I think, $23 million this year, so nothing to sneeze at. But no one in the media really has an idea or a scoop as to whether or not this contract's going to happen or not. And if he plays out the year on that rookie deal, then maybe we go out in this franchise tag situation. It does feel a little bit, even though there was some controversy around the ESPN reporting, feels a little bit like the Ravens don't want to go to that top end tier in terms of a contract, and it seems like that's something that Lamar himself feels like he deserves. So it could be interesting. I don't stir things up a little bit in Ravens world. They're just too steady over there.
They're too good.
We need a bit of move that controversy up north a bit.
Get it across the beltway. The Ravens are too good at being a functioning organization, and
that's right.
It'd be nice to pass some of that over. But no, I don't. I don't wish any of that on them.
No.
It is such a tricky thing with Lamar because you're right. I think, and this is totally just my opinion. I haven't talked to Lamar or his camp, but I think he's probably looking to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, and I think he can say, "Look, I had an MVP.
Or in that range. In that range.
I had an MVP season. I'm an elite weapon that can do things." Because here's the other side of the argument with the mobile quarterback thing, right? Maybe he's not a great pocket passer, but he can do things that nobody else in the NFL can do with his legs. So he brings a whole new dimension, and he makes your team that X factor. To go back to the fantasy football analogy, it's like when you have Travis Kelce as a tight end. It's like everybody else is getting 2-3 points out of their tight end every week, and you're getting 30. Like it takes that team to the next level. So it's interesting, but with the mobile quarterback thing, I think we're seeing more of a shift in the NFL because that became really hot when Lamar was playing really good, and now we're starting to see, I think the primary focus is still on having a pocket passer that can run really well. You look at Josh Allen, you look at Mahomes, you look at even Burrow can get outside the pocket and get you 7-8 yards on a broken play.
But I think
right?
even Mahomes gets himself in trouble by trying to do too much.
Definitely.
I think with him, he's capable of doing everything in the game. But I think he got himself in trouble last year, the second half of that playoff game, because he just tried to do too much.
Definitely.
And it's got to be, a quarterback's just got to be a facilitator, get the ball to the weapons. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. We'll keep an eye on that Lamar Jackson situation and check in on that every so often. So, how about we get to our Che Cazz of the week? What do you think, son?
Definitely.
Highly anticipated.
Highly anticipated. Pop, kick it off. Tee it up for him.
Yeah, it's so we got a little bit of a football tie-in out of Major League Baseball, right? So
is
Tommy
this the
Pham,
first MLB segment for the Dominant Pop? Sorry to interrupt, but it's a monumental moment here if it is. I think this is our first MLB segment.
I know. Well, I think if the Nats or maybe even the Orioles were doing anything worth talking about, maybe be worth it. But anyway, Tommy Pham of the Cincinnati Reds ends up slapping San Francisco Giants outfielder Jock Peterson during batting practice. Now they've kind of walked it back, said they were just joking around, but he accused Peterson of cheating at fantasy football, and then he came out later in the week and was talking about the league and how a lot of it seemed to be due to some trash talking that was going on, and that the Los Angeles Angels, superstar Mike Trout, one of the best players in the league, apparently is this fantasy football commissioner. So it's amazing to hear, these multi-million-dollar baseball players, multi-million-dollar baseball players getting so heated over a fantasy football league, and Pham actually called Mike Trout the worst commissioner in the history of fantasy football. But I just couldn't help but equate the situation. It cuts the whole situation and how seriously they're taking it. And I guess we've been known to get pretty competitive in our family bocce matches and fantasy football. We talk a fair bit amount of trash. You've been known to talk quite a bit of trash.
Oh,
but could you imagine a slapping incident in our family fantasy football league?
I could. Frankly, I could. I'm not going to name names, but I think there's a few.
I don't think anyone would step up to our commission try to slap him. He's a pretty powerful man.
Nobody's going to step up to our commission try to slap him, but I can see.
I wouldn't. I definitely would.
No, I mean he's my uncle. It's a respect thing. I can't do that. But we got other cousins and stuff where it could get we all get a little loose.
Maybe if we went back to the original Fam Bam scoring rules, it could be a slap that happens here.
Tell you what, I would give Lamar Jackson a max contract in our fantasy football league on those old scoring rules. We had, just for some insight to the people that aren't in our league, we had these crazy scoring rules set up by our former commissioner. And basically your quarterback could get like 100, 150 points a week. So yeah, in that system, Lamar Jackson gets a max contract from me. But yeah, this is funny for me because basically I'm in a bunch of fantasy football leagues. One of them's with the family, and I definitely do the most trash talking in that league out of everybody in the family. But I'll own that. I think that's what makes fantasy fun. So I talk a lot of smack, and I usually have a pretty good team that falls apart in the playoffs every year. It's like by week 7 or 8, everybody's like, Dom's winning the championship. He has the best team by far.
Weren't you told once that you had the worst roster in fantasy football history?
Somebody told me that at the beginning of the year, and I ended up finishing with like the most points for in the whole league, like number 1 seed, and then my team fell apart in the playoffs as it always does. But oh man, I think I might have had the worst roster in my league with my friends from high school, which is what I was gonna say here. That league, I'm like firmly middle of the pack when it comes to trash talking in that league, and I talk as much trash as I do in our family league. So you can imagine how crazy that league gets. And
could there be a slap in Nashville? You think that's going to happen? Little
there's been
Will
slaps.
Smith action. There's been slaps already.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's gotten physical. You never told me that.
Oh, I mean,
oh my God.
Not like seriously physical, but people have gotten slapped. Just the joking kind of thing after a few too many. But no, I could definitely see some slaps happening in that league, some verbal slaps for sure. And I mean, every fantasy football league has that one guy that pushes the rules just a little bit too far. A little bit too far. Right. I won't name names.
Tries to get away with stuff. I don't feel like we have that in the family league.
We don't. But that's because we keep the rules very simple. But this other league that I'm in with my friends, we have keepers, and I'll just tell a really quick story here. So basically, you can keep anybody on your roster, and the rule is if you keep a waiver pick, you have to give up your 7th round draft pick. And the rule is if you keep them, you have to give up your draft pick from the year before. So we had a guy pick up J.K. Dobbins, who tore his ACL, was out for the season, and is looking to be a top running back again this year. We had a guy pick up J.K. Dobbins and say, hey, I should be allowed to keep him for a 7th round draft pick next year, who didn't play a game last year. We're like, dude, you're twisting the rules. Huge fight broke out. This was a 3-day multi-layer argument over group message that resulted in our commissioner, there were boycotts, there was riots, the whole thing fell apart. So I could definitely see if that happened in person, some slaps might have been handed out. I could see it. I mean, full on, friendships were getting questioned. These are guys I've been friends with for 10 years at this point. The whole thing fell apart.
Everybody just calmed down. Tommy
Definitely.
Pham, Jock Peterson, Mike Trout. Apparently, Mike Trout's been over. One of the best hitters in the league. He's been over since this controversy blew up. Calm down. It's just fantasy football. It's going to be okay. Let's not do any slapping. I mean, I guess I've been known to get heated and competitive. We had our whole, bocce beach league imploded on us because there was almost a physical altercation there.
Yeah.
But everybody just calm down. It's going to be all right.
We almost lost.
Che Cazz, I'm going to say Tommy Pham really deserves most of it because he's doing most of the trash talk. Just calm down, count your money, focus on your hits, and fielding properly and getting your team to the pennant and all that kind of good stuff.
See, because when cooler heads prevail, like they did in the Family Bocce League, you never know who turns into your insider Ravens reporter later on down the line when you start a podcast,
That's
so
right.
thankfully we kept things cool, we settled things quickly, and everybody works out. You never know. You gotta take care of your people and gotta keep it cool. So let's real quick, let's pivot. Let's go into the NBA championship pop. So I want to talk about I want to set the scene for you here. So let me set the scene for you. So
Sure, do it.
Game 1. Jason Tatum goes 3 for 17 from the field, finishes with 12 points, shoots 17.6%. Lowest mark in any playoff game in which he attempts at least 10 shots. Who wins Game 1? If I just tell you that going into Game 1, who do you think?
Golden State.
And by how much?
Definitely Golden State.
You think Golden State wins by 40 points, right?
Yeah, you think they definitely get a solid victory, but
And
I
what
think
happens,
that's the
Pop?
thing with these teams is that there's a real contrast there in terms of Boston is built like a championship basketball team. They can lock in on defense. They're just tough. They can do all the things that it takes for winning basketball. Not to say Golden State doesn't, but Golden State plays a prettier style of basketball. The way they pass the ball, the way they can drain threes from any part of the court. And, I remember I'm watching the game and I'm telling you that, Golden State gets out to early lead in Game 1. Boston comes back, and I'm telling you, hey, Boston's for real, right? This is going to be a good series. And as soon as I say that, second half starts, Golden State goes all a big run, gets a big lead, and then the fourth quarter starts, and I mean, Boston's just draining threes, and then they get that energy, and they're locking in. And you're right, it's shocking that Jason Tatum wasn't as big a part of that, but I'll tell you, I was pretty confident in Golden State, but Boston is just just seems to have that it factor. This could be a heck of a series. I hope it goes 7.
Me too.
I really do.
Me too.
I'm excited to watch the game tonight, every game. I really hope it goes 7. But we've got ourselves a series, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I
mean, if anything, it could tilt that way. Maybe Boston's got their number.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. A lot of, I heard a lot of buzz around the game, and I have a friend, Warriors fan. Grew up in San Francisco, so not a bandwagon, just got lucky. And he's
definitely.
He kind of said, I saw him say like, oh, like, it was a good fight. Like, we just hit our run too early. Because if you look at the box score, Golden State scored 38 in the third quarter, and then Boston scored 40 in the fourth quarter. So totally, like, they went back and forth, and Boston just happened to punch last, basically. So he's saying, they're not going to go on a run like that every game. Boston won't be able to shoot like that every game. So I think
That's a fair point.
He still feels pretty good. I haven't talked to him directly, but from him posting on social media and stuff, that's what I'm inferring. But my counter to that is Tatum's not going to be 17.6% from the field every game either. And for Boston to have their guys step up like that and still win 120 to 108, that's scary. I would definitely be sweating if I was Golden State. And, that's the beauty of having your star player in Jason Tatum being a really great two-way player, which, sorry to Bradley Beal, we don't have on the Wizards. And that can be the difference, because you know what? If he's not hitting his shots, he'll step back. He'll facilitate a little bit more, and he'll focus on really playing lockdown defense. And that's what I really love about that kid.
Well, it goes back to, like, we talk about it, with basketball, and we're both huge basketball fans, and I definitely think, we're going to, as long as it lasts, we'll give the NBA championship some run here. But,
for sure.
Everyone really always talks about sort of these big three teams and these superstar teams. The problem is there's only one basketball, right?
Yep.
And I say the same thing about soccer, right? You'll see a soccer team. Soccer team, you need those midfielders that put the work in, that win the ball, win the 50-50 balls, that play defense, that run up and down the field. Not everybody needs to be, Ronaldo out there in terms of skill, but that people be, that player's trash because, doesn't quite have the skill set of some of the people. And same thing with basketball, right? I mean, you've got to have the people that do the work, that rebound, that play defense, that lock in. And when you look at Boston, they just seem to be that team. And then they do have a guy like Tatum that can score, and a Smart that can be dynamic at times. And I don't know that Horford's going to give you career best 3-point performance in every game. That's probably not going to happen. But
no,
I think it's more of an even series, and I think you can see the classic of Golden State being a great team offensively, but they do live and die by the three quite a bit.
Yeah,
that can be dangerous. And so, it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays off. Looks like it's going to be a great series.
Definitely. And I mean, Boston, when you talk about, this is going to sound funny for me because I've expressed my distaste for the Celtics on this podcast a little bit. And man, this series is really making me want to walk it back because I really love Tatum.
Right.
He's a great player. And the way the team is built, like, I really admire.
Agreed.
You got guys like Horford, you got guys like Smart. They were talking about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum not being able to make it work at the trade deadline, and they were talking about maybe they're going to move on. And a lot of Celtics fans were talking about trade Jaylen Brown for James Harden, like bring in somebody better, or trade him for, like, make a lateral move, but just get a new look. And you look at the way the front office and the coaching has made this team work, and guys like Marcus Smart and Al Horford have been there for what feels like my whole life, and they're able to keep these important role players around, and then all of a sudden you're in the championship, these guys show up, and they cover your ass when Jason Tatum doesn't quite perform the way you need him to. The guy that got you there he has an off night. You have your great veterans and bench guys show up and fill in those gaps. So I really got to tip my hat to Boston. Really fantastically constructed roster. Of course, I say this now, they're going to get blown out by 50 tonight.
Yeah.
But I am headed over to my friend's place to watch the game tonight, so I'm very excited about that. And it's going to be, I hope it's going to be a great game, and we have a lot to talk about next week because there should be should have a few games under our belt when we recap on Sunday. So
yeah, it'd be interesting to see where we are a week from now. So I do want to give a quick shout out before we wrap up here to Maryland lacrosse. So Maryland lacrosse went undefeated this season, end to end, and it's interesting because last season they went undefeated the whole season and then lost in the championship game. So I guess the Patriots can relate to that, but it was, what a gut blow to them. This year they came back and they were just so motivated, and most of their games were blowouts. I mean, they were just crushing teams and crushing just these traditional powerhouse teams throughout the season, and had a pretty easy run through the NCAA tourney. Probably their toughest game was the championship game. They got off to a big lead, and then their opponent, made a comeback on them. But, just great accomplishment. Don't know a whole lot about lacrosse. Could be the first to admit that. But anytime my alma mater makes a run like that, and they are, a pretty dominant team from a lacrosse point of view. And, Maryland wins a lot of championships. Both women's and men's lacrosse do great. Women's basketball does great. We just need those top tier sports, to rebound in men's basketball and men's football. But you could see our record in the Big Ten. I think we're in the top 2 or 3 since we've joined the Big Ten in terms of championships won. So real proud of the lacrosse team for doing what they did.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, regardless of sport or our tie to it, I used to throw the lacrosse ball. I mean, growing up in Maryland, you're just going to play a little bit of lacrosse at some point in your life. I never played it seriously, but I used to play pickup with some friends and throw the ball around. And it's a pretty crazy sport. It's up there with hockey, where like the amount of skill and the amount of physical ability required at the same time is pretty nuts. But regardless of sport or whatever, just to make a run like that is incredible. So that's, super, super cool. Go Terps. And with that,
yeah, Cornell made a run out of them, made it a little scary at the end, but it was great to see them finish the deal.
Yeah, super awesome. But with that, I mean, Pop, I think we pretty much covered everything. We were looking at maybe a shorter episode, but sure enough, we managed to fill the time pretty good.
Two Italians
two
doing
boys
a podcast.
Can ramble,
Short episode's never going to be the deal.
The boys can ramble for sure, but yeah.
That's right.
Hey, we covered it. Hope you guys enjoyed. As always, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
And thank you so much for listening, guys. Have a good week.
Love me, baby. I'm on your chain, can't complain. You're so lovely, looking past paradise. I'm so close to heaven now, just waiting on you. Love me like that, just love me like I love you, baby. Just love me like I love you.